All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Turbonomic Labs Live. My name is Eric Wright. I am going to be your host and DJ for today. Big shout out for the folks that aren't actually seeing the real brain behind the scenes here. Chris Graham, he's my man who's going to keep the stream going. So shout outs to both Chris and of course my entire team here at Turbo who let us do really fun stuff like this. So if you want to follow along, of course, you can catch us a few different ways. We're streaming right now as we speak on YouTube. You're maybe catching us on LinkedIn Live. And we also are trying to get some stuff going on Periscope as well. So if you're on either of those platforms or any of those platforms, you can also interact with us through the chat, and I'll be able to catch that on the screen. So I want to talk about today's goal. If one of the most common things that I find among technologists is how do we get started when we're like picking up a new platform? And usually there's this kind of barrier to entry as people think about, hey, I want to try out Kubernetes or I want to try out, some cloud infrastructure. And when it gets to using Kubernetes or OpenShift in particular is what we're going to tackle today. So I'm a big fan of the entire Red Hat and IBM organization, all the stuff they're doing, both in technology and just fantastic people. But what they've done is like by using OpenShift as a platform to really deploy apps using Kubernetes as the underlay, sounds really cool, but it also sounds really big. And I think the problem we've got is that a lot of people, they're afraid to kind of get started. So we're going to use a really, really cool tool today called MiniShift. And I'm going to show you from zero to deployment. And we're actually going to deploy a real live app to see exactly how it works. And you can run this on your laptop. You just need a couple of tools. So in fact, if you're following along, we'll add the links as well in the session notes below. If you're catching on the replay, you can go to github.com/Turbonomic Labs. And I've actually got, this is what I've got on screen right now. You're seeing the Turbonomic Labs getting started with MiniShift GitHub repository. So this is public facing. You can go through and we're going to show you, look at that, let's talk about inception here. I'm showing you the thing that we showing you the thing. But this lab's content allows you to go through. We've got all the links for the application that we're going to use to deploy, where you can actually get. I'm running on Mac OS X, so there's a couple of idiosyncrasies I'm going to share with you. You can download the OC command line for managing your OpenShift environment. You can download the MiniShift binary, so I've got that there. I'm not going to do the downloads for you because that's a little more boring than you'd ever want to watch on a stream, but you're also going to need Virtualbox. So what's the fantastic thing about this? It's free. Everything we're going to show you is completely freely available and open source. So you can download, go to virtualbox.org, get the latest and greatest. I'll show you why there's a couple of oddities around which version you run. You can download, so get MiniShift up and running. If you haven't already done so, you're going to want to do that. But you can even, if you're watching it on replay, just pause, go get the stuff deployed, and we'll walk through exactly what we're going to do. Now, we're going to show a little bit in the command line. Hopefully, it's not too much of an eye test because I know sometimes it's a little bit challenging. So I've got it blown up so we can see what's going on. In the true sort of Martha Stewart pre-baked oven, I've prepared a couple of quick things. I've downloaded MiniShift, which is available through the link in the repository. I've downloaded and installed Virtualbox. So we're good to go there. There's a funny little oddity that if you're running Mac OS X and you run for the first time, what you will find is this. You'll get an error saying you need to run Virtualbox version 4 or higher. Well, last time I checked, 6 is higher than 4. It is a known issue. There's a couple of issues that I'm registered in GitHub for OpenShift and for the OKD. But the way that you get around this is you run this command, you say MiniShift start, and you specifically set the VM driver. Because they also use a platform called Xhive, which allows for like kind of a nested virtualization inside Mac OS X. So we kind of got right into the nerd bits right away, but it's important because what'll happen, you'll get to this point, you're going to say MiniShift start, it's going to throw this big grievous error, and you're going to be really mad at Eric because Eric told you this just works. It actually doesn't just work. So run MiniShift start -- VM - driver space Virtualbox, all lowercase. Now I've already done that, like I said, because I kicked it off. I want to make sure I could do a fresh install and discover all of the issues we could have. Now, you also need to make sure that you go through one more thing. I've already done this again. So if I run minishift, you can see that I'm actually seeing the command. So you can either put it into your path, or in my case, I've actually located it. I'm gonna, because I'm lazy, is I put it into my user local bin minishift folder. So this way, I put all of my stuff there, my HashiCorp stuff. I move them all over there, so I always know that they're in the same spot if there's any issues. The thing that when I launch minishift, you notice it worked. So the first time you launch minishift, it's not going to work for you, and I'm going to show you exactly what the errors are you're going to get. So first of all, if you're running OS X, you're going to see this one here. Oops, bring this up here a little bit bigger. So what you're going to get is it's going to complain saying that this app has been downloaded and minishift was blocked because it's not from an identified developer. This is part of OS X with more recent releases that they block unsigned tools. I get the same thing for the HashiCorp tools. Mitchell Hashimoto shared a few tips to get around it. The second thing you're going to do is you can try and run it, but you've got to go over into your security settings. And after you've just run it from the command line, what will happen is under your security settings, you're going to get this error. And it's going to say, hey, you can't run this. Are you sure you want to do this? And then what you've got to do is you've then got to go and tell it to just run anyways. So it'll tell you that if you say cancel, it's going to stop, obviously, and you don't want to move to trash. So once you actually go in and enable it inside your security settings, it will allow you to run. So this is, an unfortunate thing that I learned the hard way, and hopefully I could save you the time of having to learn it. So I'm assuming you've gotten to that point, and this is where we're going to kick things off. We are now going to start our own minishift, and I am literally going to deploy this as we talk. So I'm going to go and I'm going to show you, I'm going to spin up my Virtualbox so you can see it as well. I'll bring it over to the same screen. I feel like that magician thing, you can see there's nothing up my sleeves. There are no virtual machines that are already deployed. So Virtualbox, we're going to see this. This is a different cluster. That's my console cluster. It's a different story. Come back another time for console. What I'm going to show you now is a very simple thing. Once you deploy minishift, the command line, it's how you manage the whole thing. So you're going to say minishift start. Now what it's going to do is it's going to go digging around. It's going to check to see if it already exists. If it does not exist, it's going to go out. It's going to pull down the virtual machine from the official public-facing GitHub repository. You can see by the screen there, it's a 4 gigabyte deployment. It has 2 vCPUs and takes 20 gigs of disk space. Not an onerous amount of space or resources, which is great because you can run this right from your laptop, which is where I'm running it right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over. Let's switch. Now, what you can see here is I've already started to see activity in my Virtualbox. It's like a teeny tiny window, but over on the right-hand side, you can see it's coming up. It's actually at a login screen. So it is running the nested installation. So it's going to deploy a virtual machine, which is running Linux underneath, and then it's going to have its own little simulated OpenShift cluster, which is very, very cool because, like I said, you don't have to do any of the heavy lifting. You're not running as a standalone. Now we go back, and you can see what's going on behind the scenes. What I'm doing now is this is happening as we're waiting for it. It's turning on the virtual network through Virtualbox, making sure that it's got all of the platform available, setting the control plane availability. So as it's going through, it's doing all these health checks to make sure that your OpenShift is going to be available. Like I said, takes a few minutes, but I actually trusted it so much that I wanted to run it live so that you can actually see exactly how long it's going to take. Now, I've chosen OpenShift as an example because we'll actually do later ones. I've done straight Kubernetes deployments There's something called Minikube as well, which has its own kind of basic deployment. There's a couple of different things that you want to be able to use, when you're thinking about choosing a Kubernetes distribution or deployment methodology. OpenShift has been one of my favorites because it has got really great application integration, a fantastic community wrapped around it, and it's Kubernetes at the core, but OpenShift itself has a lot of really, really good things around lifecycle management that we're actually going to show in our sample app. So you can see now it's starting the OpenShift cluster. If I go back, let's see so yeah, there's not a whole lot of activity you're going to see on VirtualBox right now. So I can actually just minimize that, get it completely out of the way. And again, remember, this is free. This is what I really love about that. So we're going through, and I've got a couple of quick checklist items that we're going to do. So the first thing is we need to be able to actually deploy this. So check, right? I've deployed, I've put my Minishift installer and my command line locally. I've gone through the security checks. Check, check, check. We're doing good so far. I've run Minishift start. I'm actually taking notes just in case you wondered. This is to make sure we keep track of how we go things here. As much as I love technology, I still like physical books. I even write with a fountain pen. That's the kind of weird nerd that I am. Now, we're waiting for the OpenShift cluster. And the interesting thing here is that this will be available offline as well. While the initial deployment requires internet access, what you will have to deal with, going forward is if you're doing a pull of any images that are from GitHub or from a public-facing repository, you obviously have to have network access, but you can actually run this thing offline, which is very handy. So the command line, as I mentioned here, let me sort of just get is OC for OpenShift controller. So it's still spinning away in the background there. It's the cluster tool. Yeah, it's still spinning. Now, this is the funny thing is when you're actually waiting for the thing to go, when it's running live, it seems like forever and a day. The other thing that if you're coming from the VMware ecosystem, is one of the more popular patterns I think that I've seen recently, especially in customers that I've talked to and folks in the community, is deploying OpenShift on vSphere, which is great. And in fact, if I go, let's take a look at if you shift. When you do a quick search for OpenShift, you can actually go to the main platform and you can kind of dig in a lot more. It'll get into, there's both, commercial management, also a reason why I like this relative to other distributions, because you could go and you can actually talk to a support person. You can get enabled for it. They do a lot more testing. There's a store, effectively, like there's an app store that's inside. So you guys have a catalog. And from there, they've got also lots of good learning tools in here. The funny thing is you've probably got other places you could go for it. However, it's sometimes it's even better when you can actually see it occurring and know that a human actually did this. So still spinning away in the background there. Excellent. Now, if you're an application owner or you work with app developers, this is handy because you are now much more integral to the way that their workflows are around getting applications into production, which is really the goal. So they could effectively run OpenShift in their own local implementation. They could run OpenShift on a small development cluster, and then you manage the production implementation of OpenShift. So what you end up with as a result is you've got everything, all identical. And that's one of the big reasons why we want to try it. So there's, like I said, the commercial version of this, but you can also deploy. It's just a completely open source version that's available. In fact, if I go to, and they also have great docs. Let me just whip over to the docs so you know what's going on here. You can go through the different versions. So watch out because a lot of times the links that people use, in this case here, one of the other oddities I had was that my OC command line, I had to find an older version. So because the newer one required a bit more of a download than I wanted to deal with. So I pulled down an older version in order to kick this off. And that's got me to where we are. And now the fun part is you get to watch Eric squirm. It takes a little while to launch here. Okay, slowly but surely. The other tool that you're going to need, which is inside, and we can get through how we're going to do that as well. I wanted to be able to run an app. So once we deploy OpenShift, it's all great. You can spin it up. You can see the admin console. You can interact with the UI. But it's really more meaningful if you can actually go and grab an application. So the example app that we're going to use is this one here. What you can do is you can actually go back to the original one. You can take a fork of this. And the reason we do this is because we're actually going to show through the build process how you fork this repository. We're going to deploy it as an OpenShift app. So it's already containerized, ready to cook. And then from there, what we're going to do is actually run an update and then show you how the build and application lifecycle works inside OpenShift, which is pretty cool. So again, if you go to the Turbonomic Labs GitHub, go to github.com/Turbonomic Labs, you can actually see the real deal right there. So we can get this. It's very simple. And if I go to my command line, still ticking away there. Then what we can do is we can actually see the live version. Now your code, you don't need to understand Ruby. I just happened to choose that one because it was one that made sense to me as I do Ruby on Rails stuff. So they've actually got most of the instructions in here. And then there's also an interesting challenge that if you're running locally, there's a few things that are in the app that talk about using webhooks. And as we'll show, if we ever go live here, this is great. There we go. Now we're cooking. Whew, that was a little scary. So what we've got right now, we are in. You can see on the shared screen here, I've got my machine is ready to go. It gives you everything you need right on the spot. This is dynamic, so I couldn't list this in here. So I'm going to grab this. Let's copy this. And what we can do now is let's bust open our web view here. So it gives you the URL. There's no certificate. So of course you have to say it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to visit this website. It's going to tell you it's not a good idea. I'm going to tell you you don't own me. I think everything's a good idea that I do. All right. Now, the credentials are extremely secure. You log in as developer, and it actually doesn't matter what you type here. You can just type in password. You can type in anything. Doesn't matter. This is because you're running MiniShift. It doesn't have a massive authentication system wrapped around it. Remember, when you're running this, this is purely for lab purposes. This is not meant to run production environments. It's meant to emulate what you will use in production. However, there's key things that are missing. And this is one of the features that you will find is not there. So you log in as developer. You've got projects that are already kicked up. You can actually go through a default. MiniShift creates a project called My Project. You can actually go back. Like I said, if you look at the main screen, you get your whole store. So you're actually seeing the kind of what I call my app store, which is actually a catalog. In this catalog, you can go through. You could pick one of these. You can actually deploy your own installation. It's very cool. If you ever use stuff like Rancher, which actually just got recently bought by the folks over at SUSE Linux, which is pretty cool. Also, makers of OpenStack. So shout out to the last stragglers of us that are still using OpenStack. We can go through and you can use this kind of a catalog view. But let's get right into the project. So if I go into my project, I see there's nothing there. There's no apps. There's no deployments. There's no builds, right? We're empty at the moment because we're going to go through and we're going to do this next section. So it shows you, like I said, right on screen, it says you are logged in as developer. Any value, doesn't matter what you set. But from the command line, what we want to do is we want to administer things a little bit more differently. So you just copy and paste this. You run OC login. So you're authenticating using your OpenShift command line tool. And by default, you can see the asterisk there. It's actually set you up for your My Project. So you can now check OC status. It's going to tell you I've got no services. There's nothing going on. And it says, hey, if you want, you should actually do something more than what you've got. So now this is where we're going to go back, and I'm going to go back to my repo here. So this is, again, my getting started with Minishift on Turbonomic Labs. You've got your app running. So it's going to take this command. In this case, this is me. So your fork will be different based on whatever your GitHub is. So you change the GitHub URL to your fork so that you can actually edit it. I go over here. I'm going to say, so what is this app? What does this command line do? OC, so my OpenShift control manager, new app. So that's the actual verb. So we're creating a new app. We're pointing to an OpenShift friendly repository, and it's pulling the app from GitHub. So I'm saying that use the Ruby image from the OpenShift repository, so their catalog, and then glue in the code from my GitHub repo. So we click that, it's going to do some stuff, and it tells you right there. This is the beauty part about this as well. It tells you exactly what to do as you go. You almost don't need me. So we can say OC info, OC status. There's stuff that's happening. It's saying build is scheduled. I'm going to whip over and we're going to take a look. Alrighty. Oh, look at that. It's already showing up. So right now it's showing there's no deployments. And the beauty part is this is actually going to dynamically sort of occur. You can see here in that window. Oh, I just refreshed there to make sure. So you can see what's going on is it's actually showing the clone. So it's saying that build number 1 is running because this is the first deployment. It's running a build of the app, grabbing live code. So this is the magic of immutable infrastructure. Is doing a core image and then it's live pulling the code. And this means that your developers, as they make changes, they can either trigger their own build, or you can trigger a build for them, or they can have it triggered automatically if we use webhooks, which I'll show you as well how to do. So it's going to tick away there. It's actually cloning the app. And there we go. So it says it's going to complain about a couple things because I'm using an older version of Ruby in the repository. So this is literally deploying a very simple Rails app inside a container. You get to watch the log running. You can actually click on the here. You can see full log. And there we go. It says build number 1 complete, as if by magic. So right now I'm seeing that there's 1 pod, very limited. You can actually do additional controls if you wanted to scale from there. It's showing you a few key pieces of information, what your image was, where the build was from, your last update from GitHub. So you're going to see a lot of really cool information. What you haven't done is actually open it up to the world. So in this case, you can see what I'm doing here, and I'm going to sort of fast forward. We're going to say create route. And I have no, again, I apologize, a bit of an eye chart here. So Ruby, we'll call it RubyX. I'm not going to change anything. The host name, I'm not going to have an inbound host name. So this is if you wanted to set it so that it's, you know, a something.com, that it knows how to interpret that and use a reverse proxy. Your path, so it's to the root. I'm literally taking the defaults on all of this stuff. It's telling you what port is exposed internally, what you're going to use externally. You could actually map it to port 80 if you wanted to. You can set whether there's TLS. There is not in my case because I have not set up a TLS cert. And you can set different labels, which labels are like tags, but in Kubernetes world, we click on create. And now what's happening is it's creating an external proxy facing your network, pointing to the internal container. And it even gives you the URL. So if I click this, that's it. You're literally just spun up an OpenShift cluster from scratch, nothing on your machine, deployed a Ruby on Rails app live, all in the course of under 20 minutes. If you took out the wait time, it's literally like 6 minutes of work. So this is why this is really cool, because now I could edit away as I need. I could do local development. I could do a ton of stuff, and I can continuously redeploy from this repository. Now, this is where we're going to go. Let's just jump back in and we'll take a look at a couple more things that you should kind of keep reading through. So now you've got an app deployed. You want to make sure, sorry, just check off my checklist here. Open Web UI, check. Open UCLI, check. Deploy app, check. Add route. We're ticking along quite nicely here, folks. Now, the next piece is we can actually explore the UI. You can see the different deployments. Like I mentioned, it shows that there's an active, there's one replica. I could mess around. We're not going to do scaling or the sort of a deeper stuff. We just want to show you literally getting started. I'm going to have a follow-up, which is going to show how to scale out, how to set up reverse proxies, how to set up your own custom integrations. But let's start with, let's just get it up and running so that you can mess around it and try things out. So if I click on the app, you can get different details around the configuration. So it's going to show you specifics on, again, how many replicas, they talk about strategy. So this is like update strategy. Is it going to be rolling, which is by default? You can add specific health checks. So say that I've got an application here that's running a web app, and I want to add a health check to monitor for port 8080. So if something goes wrong and it doesn't respond, it'll respawn. It'll actually redeploy that pod automatically because something's gone wrong. So there's a lot of cool features that you can have to enable that. So there's much more information. I would definitely encourage you to go through, kind of click around, see what's going on. You can see environment. You can see it's got an event log about what's actually gone on so far. You can go through, we can go through different resources that are there. We've got configuration maps, which is, again, sort of the deep end of the pool. You've got secret management if you want to create authentication and like password management inside here. So you don't have to keep clear text passwords. You can use secret management natively. You can set quotas. You can set different authorizations in here. But we're going to focus purely on this app, and let's do a build. So as I mentioned, we've got one app. This is our Ruby on Rails app. And we've got one build. It's completed. It shows you latest build number 1. There you go. That little tiny number 1. You notice they're all hyperlinks. You can actually just click in. It shows you where the source is. It even shows you where the source is coming from. So luckily, I've got that there. Okay, so I'm in my repository right now. So I'm going to say git status. I'm running the latest edition of my app right here. So let's open up the app. And I'm going to use VS Code because I get yelled at every time I use Sublime Text. Watch our first episode and you can see whether one is right or the other. And this is actually a copy of the app that we saw right in the UI. So I'm just going to, I'll jump right to the chase. And I'm going to say, let's find something here. Welcome to your Ruby application on OpenShift. Oops. Disco Posse. Okay, so I go through and I say git status. Ah, look at that. There's an update. It's literally a one page, one file app. So I'm going to say git add git commit -m updating app. Now here's the trick. Right now, you're going to do a git push. This is going to update the application in your public repository on GitHub. This could be GitLab or wherever your source is. So you've got this updated. And if I go through, let's just whip back over. We can take a look at this. I'm going to update. You notice how we had it's on master because that's how we roll. Oops. I got to get my actual, there we go. So now I've got inside here, this is just the instructions, so you won't see it unless you actually opened up this config.ru. And I'm going to do a search in here, and I say Control F, disco. All right, so you can see my changes here. It's live in the code. So now what? Well, there's the first thing we can do is if you open your app that's on, like that pops up in OpenShift, it actually has a lot of the instructions that I'm showing you right now. So you literally go in, do your changes, go back to your console here, go to your builds, and that you can see everything that's gone on. Now, the advantage you've got here that you don't have here versus like a live deployment where you're public facing across the board is you may actually have more going on, right? So if you go to your main app, you have the option to either do a fresh deployment, start a new build, you can edit the existing configuration, or dig into the logs. So I know that I'm at build number 1, so I'm going to start a new build. And it's automatically going in the background. It's queuing. Here's my little nifty log window, which I'll zoom in on a bit. So it's going through, it's reloading the container because it's using ephemeral source. It's going to go and it's going to try and rebuild from the source repository. It is not smart enough to do checks on the code, so bad code will get deployed for you. You can see it's actually redeploying the layer. So it's literally, this is completely immutable infrastructure. And look at that. One pod. Now you see what's going on here, why you've got 2 windows. That is a rolling update. It says, deploy the new one. Make sure it comes up. Make sure the pod is active, healthy. If there is health checks that were configured, it would check them. Once it's alive, it actually removes the previous container from the pod and then redeploys. This is the new active build and the new active pod. I can go over here to my window and I'm going to just do a refresh and look at that. Welcome to your Ruby app, Disco Posse. It is literally that simple. However, it's sometimes hard for us to, take the time to say, like, what's an example and why would I do this? The thing that it also highlights here is it talks about the idea of being able to do more stuff where you can actually set a webhook. I'm going to show you how this works, even though we can't complete the task today, because this is not public facing. So my OpenShift environment I'm running is locally on my laptop. It can't receive information. That's what I mean by not public facing. So we can send information, it's grabbing stuff from public repository. But what if I wanted to actually trigger, because this seems like onerous. Why would you manually trigger a build? What you're going to do is you will set up a webhook. So you go to your GitHub repository. You go to your settings. You go to your webhooks. There are no webhooks here yet, right? That's because when you go here and look at that, like I said, the instructions are right in this app. This is completely self-encapsulated, which is pretty cool. So it tells you, click on browse, go to builds. From builds, you can click on the button. So let's go to browse, builds. Configuration. And there we go. So what we've got here is we've got a generic webhook, and we've also got a GitHub webhook. And here's the cool thing. It also gives you your command line. Now I've made a choice consciously today to do a lot of stuff through the web UI. All of these features are also available through the CLI. However, you may find it's just easier sometimes to do a lot of deployments through the web UI, especially if you're coming out of the traditional virtualization space and you're not as comfortable plowing around inside Linux. So what you would do is you would copy your webhook URL. You go over to your repository. You add your webhook. and it gives you the payload URL. Again, what did I say? I said you can't do this because if you'll notice the URL, of course, it is a local URL. You have the option to also disable whether it's not actually a certificate, which is a fundamentally bad idea. That's the reason it's in red and it'll pop up a huge warning. You can tell it to trigger just a push. You can get webhook triggers for everything. You can be specific about types of events where there's only at different layers, which is kind of cool. So in this case, we would only want to push. So we would say, yep, go for that. We would say add the webhook. Again, you're going to see a grievous error here because this does not work because you can't connect to it. But the concept is there. So now you understand. If I were to do a push to this repository, it triggers the webhook, goes out back to my OpenShift environment, and it says deploy new build. And that's it. It's actually all connected together and fully automated. So now you've got the option to not only learn what you can do through the UI, but again, you want to be you can just launch your OC command line, and really, really great command line help. So you can see a lot of the stuff. We say OC status. It tells you here we are. And again, it's like kind of dig into a bit here. So it shows that I've got in my project, I've got one server running. I've got one application running. Here's the port that it's bound to, where it has a lot of information right here, exactly in what you want. And then when the last deploys were, so it's showing that there's 2 deployments, that this is the active pod. So it's showing what's going on there. You can get OC get pods. You can see what all the pods are that are running. And you can manage, control, deploy, shut down. You can do all of these different activities right from the CLI that are all available as well in the command line. So what I'd recommend is just sort of type OC. You can see a couple of different command lines that come up, dig in a little bit, and you'll be able to see more. You can actually stream the logs as well, which is kind of cool. So if you want to do a change, you can actually stream the logs right to the CLI. This is very handy when you're doing deployments because you can't necessarily see what's going on. So if something goes wrong, you can stream the logs. But that is OpenShift in a nutshell, from zero to deployment using Minishift. I think the biggest thing we should say is thank you to all the community that's wrapped around this. So using, all these tools, making them freely available, open source, they're building really, really great platform ecosystems for us to be able to leverage. Now, when you want to actually shut down, what you can do is you just type in Minishift stop. Just do a quick, I'll just do the basic command line. So if you type in Minishift, it gives you all the commands that it can run. So remember, what did we do the first time? We did a Minishift start. You can check the different status of the services and do a few different things. You can actually use Minishift to interact like the OC command line. And if there's an update, you can run the update. Let's see if there is one. Already using the latest. Okay, so I've got the latest version, but if a new one becomes available, it will download in the same immutable style to grab the core image, deploy it, layer everything on top for you. And because it's actually running in layers, you can safely do that. But what happens if I want to stop my CPU from spinning away and making my fan go? I'm going to say Minishift stop. It's actually stopping the OpenShift cluster. I'll go back over to my Virtualbox, which I minimized for some reason. There we go. So you can see this is an active screen window. So you can see it's actually doing service quiescing. So it's going to actually kill off all the OpenShift. So it's doing a clean shutdown of the OpenShift services and everything. And then it will do a clean shutdown of the OS. And then once that's done, it will actually power down your Minishift server. You always want to use the Minishift command line to control the state of your cluster. So you want to use Minishift start, Minishift stop. And the reason is because it does clean startups and shutdowns. If for whatever reason it powers off or something goes wrong or you forget or you accidentally delete the VM, just type Minishift start and it will do a health check on it and it'll actually power it back up for you if it's there. And if the services don't start, you can always delete it, redeploy. Downside, if you delete and redeploy, of course, is that you're losing your environment. So if I go back over here, look at that. You've already, so the other cool thing is this is running Ajax, right? So it's constantly polling the environment. So obviously that says there's a server connection problem. Rightly so. I'm powering it off. Oh, there we go. So my Minishift VM is powered off. I go to my command line, cluster stopped. It's really, I hate to do these as a almost a classroom style because sometimes it feels too easy, but it's just helpful to know that in the course of a very short time, oops, don't misspell Minishift. If you miss a letter, you can get into trouble. All righty, so I'm going to do my startup again. We can go back, we'll double check, we see what's going on. There we go, it's running, it's sparking up. So I don't see a need to belabor the point. I wanted to just say, number one, if you're thinking about getting started with OpenShift, this is a fantastic way to get going. We're going to have another one down the road where I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this to spin up OpenShift on VMware, how to do OpenShift on cloud. Luckily, I got some good friends at IBM. I'm hopefully going to pull in my good friend JJ Askar. If you don't already know JJ, follow him on Twitter. I think he is literally JJ Askar. Let me just double check. You waited for 20 minutes for I deployed a VM. You can wait for 30 seconds to find out JJ's Twitter handle. JJ Askar. There you go. JJ Askar. Fantastic human. He's an incredible person. So it is JJ Asghar. He's a developer advocate for IBM Cloud. And JJ and I have been doing stuff in the community together for a while, which is a lot of fun. And like I said, you don't have to do all the heavy lifting. While it's nifty, and I a technologist inside, I'd love the idea. I don't actually need to do this stuff by hand, so I can spin it up. It's going to start my cluster. It'll take a little less time this time, hopefully, because it's already warmed up. It's the first time it ran, it actually had to build the entire environment, set up all the disks, set up all the basic projects, and a lot of it's timestamped. So now it's just going to restart it, and it'll be much faster. There is really not much more to it other than you do this. So go check out Turbonomic Labs. So if you go to turbonomic.com/labs, you're going to see we'll have blogs to share the steps that we walked through today. The links will be in the YouTube. I'll add them, and we'll actually do a blog exactly on how to go grab this code, do what I just did, and then you can use this as your guide. You can always reach out. Of course, I'm at Disco Posse on Twitter. You can drop me a line, leave a message anytime. DMs are open, and I'd love to help you on your Kubernetes learning journey or whatever it is that you're keen. If you want to see more great content like this, please do let us know. So again, drop us a line. You can send it to eric.wright, eric.wright, at turbonomic.com. We can move stuff to the front because I really, really love the idea that this has been such a great interactive community already. Literally, this is our second episode, and I'm getting tons of great feedback. So please do jump in. If you've got something you want to share about open technologies, or if you want to join us for Turbo Tuesdays, and you've got something that's a great Turbonomic use case, then I'd be happy to bring you on and share your story with us. So Thank you to all the folks for watching. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy your nifty OpenShift cluster. I hope you have as much fun with it as I do. And join us again next week. So next Tuesday, make sure you go to turbonomic.com/labs/live. And we will have all the information there about when the next streams are. And you can set the little reminder. So click on the thing. Subscribe as well to YouTube so you can make sure you get notified when these get posted live in case you can attend them live. Oh, look at that. I see we got messages coming in. Very cool. Very cool. I like that we've got live. Hey, look at that. Messages are fantastic. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you at the next live show.